Hey, it's Jonathan McGinley, the owner and founder of Intentional Man, an organization that exists to inspire and equip men to live intentionally, pursue God-sized goals, and build lives of significance. I recently was able to lead a men's retreat in the mountains of Colorado, and we brought in a couple guest speakers to join us for the weekend. And the first night, the guest speaker, he talked about all the questions that come up in the different decades of life for men. So at each decade of your life, there's going to be different questions that you're typically asking yourself. So, for example, in your 20s, you might find yourself asking questions like, what truly is my identity? What am I going to do with my life? Maybe in this season, you're more concerned at this time with finding relationships, whether that's romantic relationships or friendships. You might be trying to see how you're going to do out on your own, away from your parents, how different you are from your father, or how you can truly build a life on your own. Those are some of the things as a man in your 20s you're typically concerned with. But then once you move into your 30s, which is where I find myself at this time, he talked about some new questions that start to arise in your 30s. So things like, how do I actually prioritize all the demands in my life? Where am I going to find time to do everything? How do I juggle all these different responsibilities of work and family and activities? Who are the people that I can truly walk through life with? And how far can I really go in my career? So you might be faced with some thoughts about how you feel like you should be further along in life right now. Maybe there's some things that you're still struggling with that you would have thought you'd overcome by your 30s. And then he said something really interesting about people in their 30s. This really stuck out to me. He said, in your 30s, this is typically the decade where male loneliness starts to creep in. It's the 30s where a lot of guys start to experience some loss of close friendships or relationships. In these relationships, has become less and less of a priority because of all the other responsibilities in life. In your 30s, it's typically a time where you're growing in your career. A lot of guys are getting married at this point. Maybe you're starting to have some kids. So the responsibilities really start to stack, and then time seems to become a bigger and bigger issue for you. But what was really interesting was he went through all these decades, all the questions that we asked, all the way up to the 70s and the 80s, and then he left some time for discussion at the end when he was finished speaking. And there were guys from almost every single decade represented in the room. And in my group, there was a guy in his 50s, guy in his 60s, guy in his 70s. So it was really interesting to see how they kind of processed all this. And that line about male loneliness really stuck out to all of us. That was one of the questions that really jumped out to each one of these guys. So I listened to these guys start to look back on their lives and realize that they had let friendships just kind of fall by the wayside to other responsibilities or other priorities in life. And there's a guy in his 60s. He said that moment, that was the first time he actually took the time to realize that he didn't even have one close friend that he consistently hung out with or shared his life with. And he hadn't even realized that some of his friendships from his youth, from the younger days, were pretty much all gone. And then the guy in the 50s chimed in and said about the exact same thing. They both realized that somewhere along the way in their 30s or in their 40s, they had stopped investing in friendships and were now at a point where they didn't feel like they had any close friends. And these are great guys. These are great husbands. They volunteer at church. They lead small groups. They help out with my men's ministry. They're both very successful in their careers. But at some point, they put all those other things ahead of friendships, and now they found themselves in a place where they really didn't have any close friends. And it really struck me in that moment how easy it is for this to happen to any of us as men if we're not intentional about it. When you're growing up, there are opportunities for friendships everywhere, right? They're kind of built into our lives through school or sports or youth groups. And then when we get to college, there's usually a lot of different opportunities to make friends there. And you just have way more time to actually hang out with those friends. There were times in college where I would just go post up with some of my best friends for days, just hanging out outside, playing video games, playing sports, watching sports, whatever it was. We would just do that for days on end. Things change once you start to get into your 30s and your 40s and you have more responsibilities. So in these times in high school and college, you usually don't have to think quite as much about friendships. They usually just kind of form naturally and are sustained by just enough opportunities to spend time with each other. But then as you graduate college and you start your career and you possibly start a family, those opportunities just don't seem to naturally happen quite as much. And it's in this time that slowly men seem to take more and more responsibilities and have more different priorities in life, that friendships start to kind of fall to the wayside. And that's at this point in life that you're going to have to shift from accidental friendships to intentional friendships. You're going to have to actually start putting some effort in to make sure that you're keeping those close relationships growing and that they become lifelong relationships. And there's a phrase coined by Dr. Robert Waldinger and Dr. Mark Scholes, and where they call this social fitness. Social fitness. So what they mean is that your friendships, they start to atrophy if they're not worked out. It's just like actual fitness. If you don't work out your muscles, they're going to start to atrophy, right? What happens when you don't go to the gym? You start to lose some muscle. You might put on some weight. You might experience more health complications. We know that we're not going to magically just be fit if we don't invest time into the gym. And it's the same with relationships. If you aren't putting any intentional thought and effort into your friendships, then you can't expect them to grow. They're just going to slowly kind of deteriorate and fade away. As you get older, good relationships don't just happen. You have to be intentional. You must work on your social fitness just like anything else. So these men in my discussion group, they realized they didn't put enough effort into maintaining and building friendships, and all those relationships had all but disappeared. And it was not their intention, for sure, for those relationships to fall apart, but busyness got the best of them. It was not their intention to be in their 50s and 60s and not have any close friends, but it just kind of happened because there wasn't any sort of intentionality. So my question to you is this: what are you doing to intentionally build friendships in your life? If you're young and you have a lot of friends right now, start being a little more intentional. Start building the habit of being more intentional in those friendships. Be the one to initiate the hangouts. Be the one to ask the deep question when you all hang out instead of just keeping things surface level. Start to really think about which friends are going to be lifelong friends and start to invest heavily into those friendships. If you're in your 30s, what kind of systems and habits are you setting up to make sure you don't get caught up in male loneliness? If the 30s are the start of male loneliness, you have to start to be proactive. Are you doing things right now that's making sure you're fighting against that? So if the 30s are where it happens, you got to start now before it's too late. One thing that often bothers me when I'm talking to men is the lack of initiation from guys. So I'll hear from a lot of guys when they talk to me about feeling lonely or that they don't have any friends that ever reach out. They're usually kind of complaining about that. And the first thing I ask them is, when was the last time you initiated a hangout? Or when was the last time you started the serious conversation? If you aren't being an initiator first, you can't expect others to do the same for you. You have to take responsibility for the health of your relationships. And I know it can feel vulnerable initiating. There's a chance they're going to say no, or maybe nobody will respond. There's a chance you try a few times and it doesn't work. But I can guarantee you this: if you don't try reaching out at all, that is for sure a no. So which one are you going to do? Are you going to take the risk to initiate and possibly find some rejection, but also possibly find some deep relationships, or are you just going to keep things as is and watch those relationships slowly fade away? If you never actually reach out, you're going to never have the opportunity for them to say yes. If friendships are truly important to you, you must be intentional about building them. You're going to have to put more work in as you get older than you did when you were younger. And right now, if you're in your 40s or your 50s, your 60s, or maybe even older, and you find yourself without many close friends at the moment, it's not too late. You can begin to be more intentional about it now. Think through the close friends you used to have and just give them a call or a text to check in. Start to rekindle some of those lost relationships. We were made for connection, right? We were designed to do life together. And usually when you take initiative, people are very receptive. Usually when you initiate, people really appreciate it and start to initiate back and start to be really receptive. You just might have to do a little work up front to get things started. Lifelong friendships are not built by accident. You're going to have to be intentional. So here's my challenge to you today. Just take today to call one friend that you'd like to reconnect with or go deeper with. Just give them a call today. Just check in, see how their life is going. You be the one to initiate. And then try repeating this every single day this week with your different friends. Make a list of the guys you want to reconnect with. Pick one each day. Make the call. Ask them about their lives. Or it can be literally as simple as just sending a voice message, letting them know that you're thinking about them and you're praying for them. It can be that simple. Text message, voice message, phone call, something to reach out, to be the one to take initiative, to have some intentionality to grow these relationships. So That's my challenge to you today. Start to get more intentional about your relationships and put in the effort to make sure you're building relationships that are going to last a lifetime. I don't want you to get to where you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, and you realize all these years that you didn't put enough effort into it, and now you're found in a place where you don't have very many close friendships. Let's be men that are intentional. Let's be men that take the initiative. So that's all I got for you. I hope this message was encouraging and helpful. Wherever you find yourself today, please share this with somebody you know. That could honestly even be the way to intentionally reach out to them. Share this episode with them and say you'd like to be more intentional. That could be a simple way to complete the challenge for today. So thank you for joining me. Go live a life you're proud of by living intentionally.